Pacific route. Whereas if you have $1,000 a day change on the Atlantic route, that will give you just over $1 impact. So your exposure, again, if you can have optional origin between, say, the Pacific and the Atlantic side of the United States to ship your grains, your exposure in terms of freight is different. And you can, if you have that optionality, you can trade around it, or you can try and reduce your exposure to freight in that way. To come to fuel, and we all know how volatile, this is very directly related to the price of oil. Oil goes up, IFO goes up. Price of fuel, $20 change, which again is a very standard change, and this is a change within a couple of days. A $1,000 a day higher change is easily seen in one day. Fuel, you can see also $20 in a day, it's very easily. So when I give you these $1 a ton, 75 cents a ton, all that can be compounded over a week and can end up being $5 to $10 a ton, right? So $20 a change will lead to a 25 cents increase, not very exciting I'm afraid, on the Pacific route, 55 cents increase on the Atlantic route. So again, greater exposure here because delayed in voyage, sailing voyage is much longer. I think port costs, that's very easy. If you have, you just divide it by the number of tons you load. But what I'd like to say about port costs, and it comes from a very personal disappointment I had, from a particular trade that I did. I calculated port costs loading is actually in the USA. I won't tell you which port, it's a bit unfair, but it's a port that charged port costs per day that the vessel was waiting, and these port costs were quite high. Now, I don't know how it worked out, but my vessel ended up staying there, I think, 14 days or 15 days, and I ended up with $150,000 port costs more than I had budgeted for. And so, lo and behold, the next time the grain traders came to me and say, hey, we're going to load in the same port. What's your freight rate? And that's why nothing is free, right? Ship owners are not, they'll make a mistake once, or at least I hope they do like I do, but we try not to make it twice. So when they come to me and say, okay, we're going to ship out of this port, I say, hey, last time it cost me this much. I want my money back, and I'm going to charge the port costs according to this calculation. And so there, I think the freight rate was $4 or $5 higher than the previous trade on the ceteris paribus basis. So what I would say about port costs, and there you can play a role. If you can guarantee to your ship owner lump sum port costs, or if you have agreements with ports where you can keep those costs down, because they will impact your business very directly. Don't think of it as something remote that the ship owner takes care of. It'll come straight back into your freight rate. So if you can try to negotiate those agreements, do so, because it helps us a lot. And if you can go to a ship owner and say, I guarantee you the maximum you're going to pay in that port is $20,000 or $50,000, even $100,000, then you know exactly where you stand. Because ship owners also try to manage their risk. Right? One I'd like to mention also, it's quite interesting, is sea margins. When you pay a ship every day, you go out to sea. In English law, we call it a maritime adventure. Right? It's not because we go chasing after pirates, we usually try to run away from them. But it's called an adventure because it's intrinsically dangerous. There are a lot of things that can happen at sea, and one of them is bad weather. And one of the things that we're seeing is that actually those sea margins are increasing. And as global warming makes weather patterns worse, that also has an impact on the capacity utilization of the fleet, by the way, because it spends more time at sea. Then that will also have an impact on your overall freight rate. But that's more longer term trends. Okay. Here I have a few more. Taiwan. I almost forgot. Right. Taiwan. If you're discharging grains in Taiwan on a Panamax, your terms, standard terms, I believe, are 4,000 tons sheks with a fixed demurrage rate of $10,000 a day and a dispatch rate of $5,000 a day, which on a standard Panamax means you spend around 21 to 23 days in port. Now, if a ship owner prices it on the terms, you'd end up with, or you can calculate it quite easily, but you'd end up with a freight rate of maybe $15, $20 more than what you're actually paying. So the question I have is, why does Taiwan price its business on those kinds of terms?
I can't tell you because we only ship containers to Taiwan.
Okay, sorry. Okay. All right. Anyone else want to volunteer an answer? Anyway, the point of this question is to say, when you have shipping terms that are just not realistic, because in Taiwan, I've never seen a Panamax discharge in more than 7 days in Taiwan. But what does that mean? You're paying a ship $25,000 a day, $30,000 a day. You arrive in Taiwan, your terms only start to give you demurrage, compensation for being in the port, after you've been 23 days in that port. So, and you know, what you get in dispatch is nothing. So, and even then it's $10,000 a day. So the risk, talking about managing risk to the ship owner, is huge. At some stage, at the height of the market, when we're in $60,000, $70,000 a day in the Pacific, I calculated that our risk on each shipment, just because of the Taiwan terms, was close to $3 million. All right? That's not pocket money. At least, if I have a few shipments that go wrong at that kind of level, I'm in trouble. So, my encouragement to you, or my invitation to you, is try to always keep your shipping terms as close to reality as possible. You don't want too much dispatch. Dispatch is a bad thing for you. You don't want too much demurrage either, because then you come into unforeseen territory. You don't know how much the final shipping bill is going to be. But to have terms that are so unrealistic compared to the actual execution means that ship owners will maybe price the business on a dispatch calculation. They won't price it on 23 days. But if you never discharge in more than 7 days, because of the extra risk that you're putting onto the ship owner's shoulders, we'll calculate it on 8 or 9 or 10 days. Right? And so that extra days higher, or 2 days or 3 days higher, are basically going out of the Taiwanese consumers, going back to my price of rice, right? Going out of their pocket and going into the ship owner's pocket, simply because you're adding extra risk onto him. So again, try to keep the shipping terms as close as possible to the actual performance. Okay. I think turning a blind eye to freight is not an option. That's probably why you have 3 freight experts here, and hopefully you won't have 4 opinions by the end of our presentations. Again, dispatch. A lot of charterers, a lot of people in grains in particular, the whole Shex terms and all that, like dispatch. And for the life of me, I don't know why. I really don't. Because your dispatch is at half the rate of demurrage, and demurrage is usually around the higher rate. So dispatch is great news for us. It's great news for ship owners, because, you know, we save a whole day's hire. In the previous example, say $25,000, and we're only paying you $12,500. It's free money. So what I would say is try to avoid, again, it goes back to the terms, keep them as close as possible to your actual performance. Try to avoid dispatch, try to avoid demurrage. This is another one. One of my long-term dreams is to bring the grain industry to Shink terms. You're all working Saturdays, Sundays, overtime. Let's get rid of this Shex terms, because again, talking about risk management, and we have all these arguments. Can you nominate a ship that's going to arrive on a Friday afternoon after 5 o'clock, please? And the ship owner is like, no, I will not nominate a ship that arrives 5 o'clock on a Friday. So hopefully one day we'll get to Shink terms, and that again will reduce the overall freight bill that you are paying, because all of this is priced in by the ship owner. And again, the port costs, try to negotiate lump sums, try to be aggressive in your port costs, because that'll help to keep the price of rice down in the Philippines. That's it. Thank you very much.
Or maybe a couple of questions.
Sure, yeah.
Eduardo?
Mark,
Not allowed to cheat, huh? You're from the same company.
No. It's just a basic question. I don't get this thing very well, so I'm sorry for my ignorance. Why do you spend twice as much of bunkers from New Orleans to Taiwan compared to Tacoma to Taiwan if it's only 13 days more? It's 20% more days, but it's 100% more bunker cost.
Yes.
Rough seas?
No.
No? Sorry.
No, it's quite simple actually. The ships consume a lot of bunkers when they're at sea. Typically a Panamax will consume say 30 to 35 tons of bunkers at sea, but when they're in port you only need to run enough